What is happening, you guys? Michael here. I truly believe that the fastest path to financial freedom is through real estate, hands down, especially for ordinary people like myself and my wife who work normal W-2 paying jobs. Today I wanted to review in depth one of the most recent investments we have made that officially put us into the category of financial freedom. And for those of you guys who are not familiar with that term, financial freedom is having enough residual income or passive income to pay for all of your monthly living expenses. We primarily invest our money in short-term vacation rentals. Now, the reason we like investing in those is because of the cash flow potential and the return on investment for the areas that we are investing in far outweigh any other types of investment that we have looked at. We currently have 3 short-term rentals operating on Airbnb, and we have a 4th one that we just went under contract for recently. Now, the craziest thing is that still blows my mind is that the most recent property that we closed on, which is a mountain house in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, the gateway to the Smoky Mountain National Park, that property alone has brought us into financial freedom over the past 2 months by producing such big numbers, honestly, even surpassing our original expectations. And that property is the one that we're going to review in depth today. So if you guys hang around till the end, I'm going to show you the detailed investment analysis template that we have built over the past 1.5 years that helps us rule out certain properties and really evaluate properties based on the numbers in detail. But first, if you guys don't mind doing me a huge favor and just giving the like button below just a little bit of love, just tap it so it turns blue, and it honestly just helps with the almighty YouTube gods provide us all their greatest blessings. And of course, if you guys have not subscribed yet and find some kind of value from this content, I really do appreciate if you do subscribe, and hopefully I can provide value in future content as well. Okay, enough, Michael, show me the money. So our criteria for finding a property in the Smoky Mountains or around the Smoky Mountains area was to find one that stood out from the ordinary cabin that's out there. If you guys go to Airbnb or VRBO, the vast majority of properties that you're gonna see honestly look very similar to each other. They're all coated in wood and they kind of look like grandma's cabin. They're rustically furnished, which honestly is a nice little getaway. That's what a lot of people go there and expect to rent. But we've found that we would be able to charge more and honestly attract a little bit more money and a higher occupancy rate by still maintaining the rustic feel, but having a much more modernized cabin. So what we were looking for was a place that needed a little bit of work, just cosmetically, some new paint, some new finishes, things like that, that would ultimately bring us the numbers we were looking for. And it didn't have as much intention from other investors, so the purchasing price wasn't as inflated as some of the other properties we saw on the market. So we found this place, and here are some of the before photos. And some of the items that we knew it needed was just some new paint, some new flooring on the upstairs and in the staircases, some light fixtures needed to be replaced, some new furniture needed to be added, and just some minor updates. We've swapped out a few toilets and a few fans and added some lighting in the backyard to make it a special spot. And the house was actually producing just over $60,000 in rental revenue, looking like this, and having a funny smelling carpet upstairs, and it slept 12 guests. So after crunching some numbers, we looked at Airdna, which pulls a lot of data from both Airbnb and VRBO. We looked at some competitive listings on both Airbnb and VRBO that would be competitive to an after repair and new furnishings project that we were working on, something that was similar and slept a similar amount of people, see what they were charging, about how much they were occupied. And we ultimately came to a conservative estimate when we first bought the property of doing around $90,000 in annual revenue. So we thought we could take it from $60K to $90K with some upside as well. Now that we've had the property listed since mid-October, we have been booked solid, far beyond our expectations, and charging more than what we actually originally forecasted to charge. But our estimates now predict that we're going to surpass $125,000 in annual revenue from bookings. So the asking price was $550,000, and it did not have a lot of pressure from other investors. And some other deals that we had put bids on, we were outbid by $100,000 in some cases because people are looking for turnkey rentals. They're furnished, ready to go. They could list them as soon as they close on the place. So this place didn't have pretty much any pressure. It's been on the market for over 200 days. So we knew we had some leverage. So what we like to do is negotiate closing costs, because closing costs ultimately take more money out of our pocket and bring down the return on investment numbers. So if we can get the seller to contribute the majority, if not all of our closing costs, that will actually bring up our cash on cash and total return on investment. So a strategy that we usually do, and this has worked in almost every deal that we've done, is go in at asking or slightly below asking price if it's not a competitive situation, and ask them to contribute a small amount to our closing costs. And we do this because we believe that they're going to most likely counter offer, and we're gonna see what kind of wiggle room they have. So we went in at $535 on this, and I think we asked them to pay a couple grand in closing costs, but the ultimate goal was to actually go back to their asking price and get them to pay all of our closing costs. And closing costs for this property were estimated to be around $10,000 plus our title fees, which is typically between 2 and 3 grand. So they countered with $542, so we knew they were willing to wiggle a little bit and meet us halfway. So we actually went back and offered $550 for our final counter, but for them to pay 10 grand in closing costs and our title fees. And the reason why it's beneficial for us as the buyer, I already mentioned with our return on investment numbers, but it makes really no difference to the seller. If they were to sell the house, for example, $540,000 and pay nothing in our closing costs as the buyer, or if they were to sell it at $550 and pay 10 grand in our closing costs, it's the same difference on the back end of the transaction. So it's a win-win situation for them, makes no difference, and for us it makes a huge difference in our investment numbers. They ultimately accepted the offer, and we closed at $550K, and for them to pay $10K in our closing costs and our title fees, which we were ecstatic about. Now we had some unique financing because this is a secondary home that we plan to use some in our free time, so it's technically a secondary vacation or secondary home loan that we were able to secure a 10% down payment and a favorable interest rate. Our interest rate was actually 2.875. So normally with investment loans, you're required to put 15 to 20% down, maybe even 25% down in some cases. But for this particular property, and this is what makes vacation rentals so unique, is that you can use the property whenever you want and also rent it out when you're not there. So you get a much more favorable rate, and you can put less down, which is less money out of pocket. Again, jacking up the return on investment numbers. So before I dive into the investment analysis and go over all the detailed numbers, I want to show you guys some of the after photos to show you what we did with the place. So we put on a fresh coat of paint on all the walls. We used white paint for most of the walls, which really brought out the wood trim and showed some of the rustic feel of the traditional cabin. And then we added black paint on the fireplace, stone, and we added black paint in all of the bathrooms, on the cabinets, on the kitchen cabinets, and black paint in the game room. And some of the other things we did, we swapped out a lot of the light fixtures, some of the toilets, we swapped out the vanity mirrors, we placed new furniture in almost every room. We kept some of the bed furniture that they had, added string lighting out back, and then we refinished the deck by sanding and staining it to protect it from the weather elements, and ultimately had an amazing finished product that really fit the vision that we were going for. And you could see the major difference here, and people are willing to pay a lot more for a place that's looking like this than it did before. Additionally, in the master bedroom, there was enough space that we could add bunk beds. So instead of just cluttering it with random furniture to take up space, we actually took out that king bed and we put in 2 queen over queen bunk beds, which, number one, kids love this, and a lot of our guests are families on vacation, so kids can go stack in the room. There's a 65-inch TV where they can stream movies on Netflix or Amazon Prime, and that sleeps an additional 8 people instead of just 2 per that room. And we have a pull-out couch in the game room, so total we can now sleep 16 people. So we went from 12 before to 16 now, and the more guests you can accommodate comfortably, the more you can charge, because when you guys are booking a vacation, you're looking at price per head, not necessarily just a baseline price per night. So what we do when we're forecasting is look at an overall average nightly rate for the entire year, and then the occupancy rate, which is a baseline number of nights per year that the property is going to most likely be booked. You multiply those 2 numbers together and you get your projected annual revenue. So I'm about to show you guys the spreadsheet detailing all these numbers, and we're going to look at what the actual projections are looking like. All right, so first on the left part of this template, I'm going to review the investment numbers in detail. So the purchase price was $550,000. The down payment was 10%, so the total down payment was $55,000. And once you factor in the closing costs, it would have normally been around $15,000 or so. Since we got the seller to contribute around 10 grand plus our title fees, it brought our total costs incurred at closing out of pocket of $3,000. So the total amount, including down payment and closing costs, was $58,000. And then we're going to look at the rehab costs. And we had budgeted for this up front by researching how much it costs to paint and redo the floors, got quote from different contractors. So we had a good ballpark, and we ultimately ended up spending right around $20,000 between all of the rehab costs. And you'll see down here I have projections based on number of bedrooms and how much it costs typically to furnish these bedrooms. And I adjusted these numbers based on the actual amount we spent, which was right around $30,000 for all of our furnishings, which brings us to a total out-of-pocket investment of $108,000. Now, I realize many of you are sitting here thinking, I don't have $108,000, and that's okay. First of all, I want to state that my wife and I had little to no money about 4 or 5 years ago and worked up to a point where we could invest that sum of money. Secondly, you guys can find other ways to invest in real estate, either with taking none of your own money out of pocket or splitting costs with another partner going in on the investment with you. So if we look at the forecasted revenue for this property, we forecast that we're going to be able to charge right around $525 per night. Most of our weekend nights and holidays are between $800 and $1,300 a night, and most of our weekdays are right around $400 to $500 per night, but we do go as low as around $275 per night on some of the weeknights in the slower months like January. So we just kind of ballparked it right at $525 to be conservative, and our estimated occupancy rate at 65%. And we do believe that's very conservative because the average occupancy for all cabins in this area is between 60 and 70%, and the 75th plus percentile, so if you have a nicer place that's booked more often, has good reviews, etc., the occupancy is likely going to be between 75 and 85%. So based on that occupancy rate, the total number of days we expect to be booked per year is right around 237 nights. So you multiply that by the average daily rate, and you get the annual projected revenue of $124,556. And you divide that number by 12 to get the forecasted monthly revenue on average of $10,380. Now, there are expenses operating Airbnbs outside of the debt service, which we'll get to in a minute. So we're going to talk about the operating expenses. So what is involved in your monthly operating costs. So next on this spreadsheet, we have the monthly operating costs, which is taxes, insurance, HOA, water, gas, electric, right? All your utilities. You have Wi-Fi if you provide TV or cable. You have to budget for future repairs. So typically we budget, depending on the size of the house, between $100 and $250 a month. And then incidentals if you provide coffee, soap, toilet paper, which we actually don't provide in this house. Our cleaners provide some of the incidentals for us built into the cleaning cost, but I just went ahead and budgeted $50 per month just in case we have to provide additional costs there. We have pest treatment every single month, which is $45. We called a local pest company and they gave us a quote. And then we have garbage and recycling is actually $0 for this property since it is included with the cleaner's cost. They actually pick up the trash and dump it for us. Now we use YourPorter, which is a property management software that helps automate a lot of our messaging with guests and our cleaners, and that's $7 a month. And then we use Pricelabs to price our properties, and it's an intuitive pricing tool that dynamically changes pricing based on demand in the area. So that's $20 a month. There's no city permit for this particular location based on the zoning that this house is in. And the Airbnb service fee is currently set at 3% for hosts. So this number, $311.39, is based on 3% of the monthly revenue of $10,380. So all these costs added up brings us a total monthly operating expenses of $1,648.72 and an annual operating expenses of $19,784.69. So next we need to calculate our net operating income. So this is our income before accounting for our debt service, so the principal and interest that we owe the bank for taking a loan on this house. Our net operating income, it's as simple as taking the monthly revenue minus our operating expenses. So in this case, we take our $10,380 and we subtract the monthly operating expenses of $1,648.72, brings us to a monthly NOI of $8,731. Multiply that number by 12 and you get the annual net operating income of $104,772. And a cap rate, I have that in here. It's less relevant for short-term rentals and single-family units as it compares to multifamily or apartment complexes, things like that. But just to compare for other investors out there, the cap rate here is 19%. Next, we have to factor in principal and interest. Now, a portion of this we're going to get to in the total return on investment because the principal payment is being paid down by your guest technically because it's accounted for an expense for us, but they're building equity in the house for us because they are actually paying the loan off and paying the house off. So the principal and interest costs, and I also include PMI, which is private mortgage insurance. So if you put less than 20% down on the house, you're likely going to have to pay 0.5% to 1% of the loan amount in the form of an interest charge. And that's just a way for the bank or the lender to collect a little extra money by offering you what's known as a riskier loan, I guess, per se. So the monthly principal and interest and PMI for this property is right about $2,253 per month. And you can just multiply that by 12 to get the annual numbers. And then what we're going to do to get our pre-tax cash flow or our passive income or net income is take the net operating income and subtract that total debt service. So we take those numbers and we get a monthly cash flow of $6,478 on average. And the annual cash flow prediction is $77,736. So those numbers are great, right? But what we need to do is actually calculate the cash on cash return on our investment in order to really see how hard our investment dollars are working for us. Because you don't want to have the cash flow be deceiving, because if the cash flow could be massive, but the cash on cash return could be 5%, and that money you invested is probably better off just sitting in the stock market collecting 8% on an index fund. So we want to make sure we're not only beating the stock market, but beating any other type of investment that we could possibly make to maximize how hard each dollar is working for us. So in order to calculate your cash on cash return, what we need to do is take the annual cash flow pre-tax and divide that number by the total dollars invested out of pocket. So in this case, we're going to take the annual cash flow of $77,736 divided by the $108,000 invested out of pocket, and that brings us a cash on cash return of 71.98%. Now, if you're looking at a traditional real estate investment, you're looking for a 12% cash on cash return number because you want to beat the stock market. This is why I love short-term vacation rentals. If you get the right property and make it unique and your numbers make sense, you can obliterate any other return on investment in any other area, at least that I have experienced. 71.98% is an insane return on your money. Now let's get into what's extremely exciting about this, which is equity that we're gaining in the property from both the forced appreciation through the rehab, because once you rehab and add new furnishings, add new paint, if you were to fix up, put on a new roof, any changes you make on a property, once you are done with those repairs, you have what's called an after repair value. So if you were to have the property appraised once you did all the work to it, it's most likely going to appraise for a higher amount than what you bought it for. So what you can do is look at local comps in the area, comparable properties that compare in number of bedrooms, square footage, location, finishes, things like that, and you can come up with the new estimated value of the property. So this is what I like to call forced appreciation or forced equity from appreciation. Now, the value here on a very conservative end would be $650,000 based on other cabins in the area. But if you look at the revenue numbers that we're producing, other cabins that sleep 16 guests that are producing over $125,000 in revenue per year would easily sell for $750,000 to maybe even upwards of $1 million. That's how crazy and how high of a premium these properties are selling for out in this area that are producing revenue like that. But for conservative estimates and realistic numbers, I'm going to put a $650,000 because that's what I think the house would appraise for today. So in order to get the forced appreciation amount, you're going to see at the bottom here, we're going to take the new after repair value of $650,000 and then we're going to subtract the original purchase price, which was $550,000. So we get $100,000 in forced equity from the rehab that we did. Now we have to account for potential appreciation over the next 12 months. And I do realize, guys, that this is an unrealized gain, so I'm not accounting for this as income per se. And also, you will pay taxes on it if you're to sell the property, so I understand that. But you do need to account for appreciation because it's a hedge against inflation, and also in growing markets where the demand is high, you guys will be able to leverage this equity down the road if you're to get a new appraisal and do a cash out refi or a HELOC. We're not going to get in depth on that today, but I like to budget for a 3% growth in appreciation year over year. In reality, the Gatlinburg Pigeon Forge area has appreciated between 8 and 10% over the past few years, so just keep that in mind. Now, for the appreciation rate, we're just going to take that 3% and multiply it by the new value of $650,000, and then that brings us to $19,500 that we're estimated to get in equity over the next 12 months just from appreciation in the house. Now, another part of the total return on investment we need to account for is equity gain in the property. So separate from appreciation, as I mentioned before, we have a debt service or a mortgage, which is technically part of our expenses that we pay each month, but a portion of that is principal and the rest is interest. So we need to account for principal paydown because that technically is being paid for by our guests. So we get to keep that. That's your equity and wealth and your net worth. That's all growing without you guys having to lift a finger, which is why I love real estate. So in order to calculate this number, we need to go to bankrate.com, I like to use, or you can go to any mortgage calculator or get the amortization schedule from your lender and look at the first 12 months what you're paying in principal. So for this property, it was right around $10,500 in the first 12 months. So in order to calculate the total return on investment, we're going to take a few different numbers here. We're going to take our annual cash flow. We're going to take any forced equity from appreciation. We're going to take the estimated appreciated value over the next 12 months, and we're going to take the principal paydown, add those numbers up, and then divide that number by the total amount invested out of pocket. And that's going to bring the true total return on our investment for the first year. So we're going to go ahead and add up these numbers. We have $77,736 from cash flow, forced appreciation of $100,000, the estimated appreciation for the next 12 months of $19,500, and principal paydown totaling $10,500 for the first 12 months. That adds up to $207,736. So we're going to take that number and divide it by the $108,000 invested out of pocket, which brings us to a 192.35% return on our investment in the first year alone. And I know what some of you are thinking out there. Some of you are probably thinking, that's absurd. And then there are some people out there who are thinking, why would I invest in that? I invested in Tesla back in March and I'm up 750%. Okay, that's great, and I wish I invested in Tesla too at that time, but for me, when you can calculate these numbers and be fairly accurate, there's less volatility than investing in the stock market. You're less subject most of the time to macroeconomic factors that cause ups and downs in the market. This is why I like investing in real estate. It's an equity play, long-term wealth building strategy, and you get paid every single month, which helps you guys achieve financial freedom. If you guys have any questions or comments, please drop them below. I will do my best to answer them. I really appreciate you guys watching. Hopefully you found some value in this video. If you guys did and you haven't subscribed yet, please do subscribe. I hope to see you guys again for future videos. So thanks again for watching and have a very Merry Christmas.